What's up, everybody? So today I wanted to do a Goosebumps Series 2000 tier ranking. Now, I already have a ranking video up of the Goosebumps Series 2000 books, but it's an older video, and this isn't going to be like an exact ranking from like 25 to 1. I'm just going to be kind of tier ranking them, and we'll go through these again real quick. Of course, S tier is like the best of the best. These are among like my favorite Goosebumps books of all time, and I have like no issues with these books, or almost no issues. Like, these ones are nearly flawless for me. I absolutely love the books that I put in S tier. A are really good. A books are Goosebumps books that I really love and don't really have much of a problem with either, but they might just have like a couple of small flaws or nuances with them that keep them from being an S tier for me. They're just ones that I don't just love. I'm not completely in love with, I guess. B tier are books that are still really good. I enjoy B tier books. These are pretty decent. C tier are books that are just okay. They're not bad. They're not great. They're just kind of like mediocre. D tier are Goosebumps books that are not very good, but they're not quite terrible either. I don't generally enjoy these D tier books at all, but they're not obviously overtly bad or anything like that. And then F tier, obviously these ones are. F tier books are ones that I don't care to ever read again. Like, these are just the worst Goosebumps books ever. So yeah. And I'm not going to be going through these in order or spend a lot of time talking about these. I'm just going to kind of pull them out at random and tell you a little bit about why I want to put it in whichever tier it goes in. So let's just kind of get started here. Bride of the Living Dummy. This one I think is a B tier. Yeah, it's a B tier. I really enjoy Bride of the Living Dummy. It's a good book. I'm not a fan of the way it ends, and like the ending itself, or like the big climax, all the action that takes place right before the twist ending. It gets a little bit too over the top, I think, for my taste. It's just a little bit ridiculous, and there's a lot of gross out horror in here and just like some weird stuff that happens. But I do really think this is a solid book, and I think the earlier Night of the Living Dummy books, like the first 3 in the original series and then the 2 in Series 2000, are all really solid for the most part, honestly. Like, I think that was definitely the best era for the Night of the Living Dummy books. So yeah, Bride of the Living Dummy is B tier. Let's see what we have here. The Haunted Car. This one, I think we're going to have to put in A tier. The Haunted Car is a really solid, like, airtight story. It's got a pretty linear plot to it. It sticks to like one storyline, and it does it well. R.L. Stine is notorious for having just all sorts of crazy stuff in his books, and is known for just kind of throwing the kitchen sink at you at times, so to say. But The Haunted Car is a really good, solid story. It's a bit creepy at times, and the main character is like kind of a car guy, and him and his dad go and buy a new car together. So there's some interesting relationships, like between the kid and his parents, and I do like the theme of cars too, because I wouldn't quite say that I'm a car guy myself, but I am interested in them a little bit. So yeah, The Haunted Car is a good book, and I believe this is one of the most popular books in Series 2002. I think most people agree on that. So yeah, The Haunted Car is a solid A tier, I think. Let's see, Slappies Nightmare. This one is either a B or C tier. We'll put it in the B tier. I think Slappies Nightmare is actually stronger than Bride of the Living Dummy throughout. This one is a lot darker. There's some pretty heavy and dark stuff in Slappies Nightmare, and it also has a very unique take on the Night of the Living Dummy books, this one being told directly from Slappy's perspective. He is like the main character of this book. But the twist ending on this one is very questionable. It doesn't completely ruin the book, but it kind of does. It's hard to explain without spoiling anything. If you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. For some people, it seems to ruin the book completely, and I can see that. I can understand why. It definitely does take away from a lot of the earlier events in the book, but it also kind of makes sense, and it is sort of like foreshadowed throughout the book. It's a very divisive book, and it's hard to talk about or get into any sort of detail without spoiling anything. So yeah, we'll put it in the B tier, I think, because it is really good. I still enjoy it, though probably on the lower end of the B tier. When I start to add more books into here, I'll probably like try to keep it on the lower end of B tier. It's like in between these two, I think. But anyway, moving on. Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid. This one is probably D tier. I'm not really a big fan of this one. The only redeeming quality of this book is, and I've said this before in past videos, for those of you probably already know, but Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid is one of the very few Goosebumps books to actually get me to laugh out loud. This one has so many just weird and crazy twists at the end and leading up to the end. And then like the very last sentence of this book, it is just so ridiculous, just so dumb. But it just struck a funny bone with me, and I was literally just laughing out loud. So yeah, for that, it stays out of the F tier, but as a whole, the book itself is not very good. Might be the weakest Series 2000 book, if I'm being honest. Yeah, it's just not very good. Be Afraid, Be Very Afraid is in the D tier for me. Let's see, The Werewolf in the Living Room. This one is... This is kind of a weird one for me. This was one of my favorites, or perhaps my favorite S2K book as a kid. And it's sort of fallen down the ranks a little bit. It's a very flawed story. I've heard other Goosebumps reviewers, Michael Goosebumps fan and Goosebumps completionist, say that it reads sort of like a rough draft, and I kind of agree with that statement. It does feel a bit incomplete. It just feels like it's missing something. It kind of skims over some events. It has a really big scope. This book is split into two parts, and there's like some big time jumps in here in between the parts, and some of it just kind of feels rushed. But I love the concept of this book. I think it's a great idea. It's just the execution didn't feel the best. R.L. Stine wasn't on point with the execution of this one, but I still have a lot of sentimental value for this one, and the cover art is fantastic. One of my favorite all-time Goosebumps covers, maybe even my favorite, I don't know. But yeah, as it is, it's probably... This is kind of one, too, I'm not sure if I want to put in C or B tier. I'm thinking... Whoops. We'll just leave it in B tier for right now. Full Moon Fever. This one is probably C tier. Yeah, I think Full Moon Fever is a C tier book, guys. I do like this one, don't get me wrong. Like I said, C tier books aren't bad. I enjoy these, but they're not great. This one is just kind of all over the place. This one has some ridiculous stuff in it as well. And the tone of this one is just kind of all over the place. I don't know how to even explain it. It's got a weird mix of humor and like horror and gross out stuff. And normally R.L. Stine does a pretty good job of blending those ingredients. But this one, it just feels like R.L. Stine wasn't sure what he wanted to go for with this one. If he wanted to go for more of a comedy or more of a horror story with this one. Yeah, I don't know. And I didn't like the ending of this one either. This one is just all over the place. The tone is just, I don't know. This is a tone-deaf book in my opinion. And just some of the logic in this one and some of the things that happen, just very questionable. Full Moon Fever it's an okay book. I get some enjoyment out of it, but it's not great. We'll leave it in the C tier, I think. Ghost in the Mirror. Oh boy. This is one of the most frustrating Goosebumps books for me. The first half of this book is fantastic. And by fantastic, I mean it is one of the creepiest and just most atmospheric, like, I don't know, 40 or 50 pages R.L. Stine has ever written, in my opinion. Like, I remember this book scaring me as a kid, one of the few Goosebumps books that actually, like, really creeped me out. And even when I reread this, like, a year or two ago, or I think it was last year when I reread through all of these, even as an adult, this one creeped me out a little bit. Like, there's just some crazy atmosphere, and some of the things that happen in this book is really dark. This book is kind of like a darker, more intense version of Let's Get Invisible from the original Goosebumps series. But boy, is it effective. Unfortunately, the second half is not so good. It kind of steps away from like that eerie atmospheric buildup and just kind of goes all out into like monster creature feature type of horror, and it doesn't land for me at all. just borders too much into the goofy territory. It's just a little bit too much, too extra. And a lot of that tension that we had in the first half of Ghost in the Mirror just kind of just falls away, and there's never really any payoff for it, in my opinion. So yeah, Ghost in the Mirror I think is a C tier book. If this book would have stayed along the same lines as it was going for in the first half, this book would probably be one of my favorites of all time. It would definitely be in the S tier, but it just really falls flat. And the ending to this one too is so dumb. One of the worst twist endings in Series 2000. So yeah, for that alone, I have to put Ghost in the Mirror in C tier, unfortunately. So, moving on, let's see. I Am Your Evil Twin. This is a pretty decent one. I don't know if it's quite B tier though. I think this is a C tier book too, although I don't know. We'll just leave it there in C tier for now. I do like I Am Your Evil Twin. This one has some interesting character dynamics in it that we don't see very often. There's like divorce hinted at, and like a sibling relationship, and they don't even know they're siblings kind of thing going on. Unfortunately, this one just kind of rehashes like the stay out of the basement type story from the original series. And the twist ending on this one also makes me kind of mad. It's just, it's not backed by logic. It's just kind of dumb. Like, there's just some plot holes in it that irritate me a little bit. And generally, I'm not a fan of like the more science fiction, like robotic oriented Goosebumps type stories. And this one kind of falls into that little subgenre. And that subgenre just doesn't really tend to appeal to me a whole lot within Goosebumps. So yeah, this is a decent book. I like it. But I think I'm just going to leave it in C tier for right now. Moving on, Attack of the Graveyard Ghouls. This one is... it's like upper... This is another one I'm kind of having a hard time deciding. We'll put it in B tier, but we'll put it at the lower end of B tier. Attack of the Graveyard Ghouls is a bit misleading, which I think is why I'm a little bit disappointed with it. There's not really any ghouls in this book, and the cover art is a bit misleading as well. They're more like ghosts or spirits in this book. But I do enjoy this one. This one is really dark, really action-packed. This one is full-on horror. There's very little comedy in this book, which is why Attack of the Graveyard Ghouls is, I think, one of the more popular ones in the series, and it was also one of the few to get a reprint, classic Goosebumps reprint. Unfortunately, it does fall apart a little bit towards the end. It's got a really goofy twist that I don't really care for, and it is a little bit misleading, but I mean, it's still a good book. Attack of the Graveyard Ghouls, I think, is a solid B tier. Moving on, Jekyll and Hyde. This one is definitely A tier. I think maybe even above Haunted Car, too. Just by a little bit, I think I like it better than Haunted Car. Jekyll and Hyde used to be one of my favorites as well as a kid, and upon rereading it, it's still up there, honestly. Like, it's almost S tier status, but the one thing that keeps it from being S tier status for me is there's a decision a character makes towards the end of the story that is not backed by any logic whatsoever. It's just there to kind of support a twist ending that occurs. And it just feels very forced and unnatural, and it just ruins it for me a little bit. It doesn't completely ruin the book. Obviously, it's still an A tier. And the reason it is so high is because this is just such an emotional and serious Goosebumps story. This one reminds me of kind of like the Ghost Next Door from the original series, just in terms of like how just like sober and like emotional this book is. And it's not, it doesn't have a lot of like the lightheartedness or goofiness to it that the other Goosebumps books do. This one is just very sentimental and just kind of macabre and tragic. It has like elements of like gothic to it. And yeah, I don't know. This Stein just really hit a note with this book. I'm pretty sure this is a very popular one as well. I think most of us within the Goosebumps community agree that Jekyll and Hyde is a really, really fantastic Goosebumps book. So yeah, A tier for that one. Let's do Invasions of the Body Squeezers parts 1 and 2. So let's see. This is part 1, I believe. And I think these are both going to be C tiers for me, guys. So I do enjoy these a little bit, but here's the problem. with Invasions of the Body Squeezers, is I feel like these books would have been better as just one book. These books are so very repetitive and just stretch on needlessly, just so much filler content. A lot of the stuff that occurs in part 2 is the very same stuff we see in part 1. One of my biggest gripes with this book is the main character is, for one, he's kind of an idiot. And secondly, he just goes around trying to convince his friends, family, police officers, just like everybody he knows, that these body squeezers are invading. And it just gets very, very repetitive. And I feel like that's what the majority of the book is just him trying to convince everyone that these aliens are coming. And of course, nobody believes him. And yeah, these ones just feel like a little bit of a flop. They're still okay. I don't hate them or anything. Obviously, they're in C tier, but this was just a missed opportunity. I think if this book was condensed and put into one book and had all of the filler taken out and all of that other garbage, I think this would be a really good book. It might be a B or even an A tier one. But as it is, these are C tier books for me. Moving on, Fright Camp. This is an okay one too. I'm thinking C tier for this one. Fright Camp is kind of like a cross between One Day at Horrorland and Welcome to Camp Nightmare from the original series. And unfortunately, it's a bit predictable, I think. And with the twist ending we get with this one, it sort of removes, kind of like Slappies Nightmare, it kind of takes away from the rest of the book. Like, you kind of see it coming, and it takes away from the fun of everything. So yeah, Fright Camp it's not bad, but it's not very good either. It's a C tier for me. At the bottom of C tier as well, because I definitely enjoy these other ones a bit more than Fright Camp. Let's see. Are You Terrified Yet? This is a pretty good one. I think this is a solid B tier book for me. This one is sort of another rendition of You Can't Scare Me, book number 16, I believe, from the original series, or 17. I can't remember what number it is off the top of my head. Something like that. But yeah, this is a pretty realistic, grounded Goosebumps stories. There's no supernatural stuff going on in here, no monsters or ghosts, and it's just about a kid trying to prove that he's brave to his friends. And there's like just a lot of series of pranks and stuff in this one, but it is very entertaining. It's a very solid story. It's always nice to read a Goosebumps book that doesn't have, it's a little bit different than usual. This one doesn't have any crazy monsters in it or wild humor. It's just a nice, realistic story, something that's more relatable. And I think that's why it works, is you can relate to it a little bit. And it's airtight. There's not a bunch of plot holes in it or anything like that. And that's just always nice to get a Goosebumps book like that, because Goosebumps books generally don't always make sense. So yeah, this is a good one. Solid B tier. I think I actually like it a bit more than Graveyard Ghouls and Werewolf, maybe? I don't know. We'll just leave it in B tier for right now. I'm not really... like I said, I'm not going to spend forever trying to rank these exact. We're just putting them in their tiers. So yeah, let's keep moving on to Return to Horrorland. I think this one's a D tier, guys. Return to Horrorland is a pretty disappointing sequel. There are some things I really like about this book. Even without comparing it to One Day at Horrorland, it's hard to compare it to that book, because the first one is so good. One of my all-time favorites. But if you don't compare it to that one, like, it's not terrible. There's still some fun to be had here. And there's also some references to other Goosebumps books in this one. And I believe it's the first time R.L. Stine does this. And one of the only times he ever does it, to be honest. And it kind of creates that, like, Goosebumps lore and, like, the possibility of other Goosebumps books existing, like, in the same world. So it's just kind of interesting. But yeah, as a sequel, it's not very good. It's definitely kind of a disappointing sequel, not nearly as good as One Day at Horrorland. And we're just going to put it in D tier, because it's not completely terrible, but like I said, there's some fun to be had with it, but it's just okay, I guess. Revenge R Us. This one is either C or D tier. This one, of course, R.L. Stine continuing the trend of reusing his plots. This one borrowing from Be Careful What You Wish For from the original series. This one, to me, is a more fun version of that book. This one is a lot more humorous, more wild. There's some stuff in here that is just pretty crazy. This one isn't really. This one, I think some people take it as supposing it's supposed to have like a moral to it or kind of a message, and it sort of appears that way initially. But the more you read it, and once you get to the end, you realize that it's not like that at all. It's just supposed to be more of a humorous book, just something you don't take seriously. And I think I'm going to put it at the bottom of C tier. It's like kind of in between C and D. I think I like it a little bit more than these other ones, so we'll put it in. Yeah, we'll put it at the bottom of C tier. Revenge R Us is, I enjoy it, but you just have to, don't really take it seriously. It's just a really goofy one, in my opinion. Alright, let's move on to Cry of the Cat. This one is going straight to nope, just kidding. S tier. Cry of the Cat is probably one of my favorites of all time. And I did say that S tier books are like perfect or might be flawless. This one actually does have a couple things I don't like about it. But for the most part, I absolutely love this book. I just love everything about it. I am drawn to like stories about killer animals and like wildlife or just animal stories in general. I like that kind of subgenre. So this one just really appeals to me, and it's really creepy too. I think this is one of the creepiest Series 2000 Goosebumps books, and this one has a wild like climax and ending. Just some of the stuff that happens in here is just really creepy and kind of messed up. I really like it. And yeah, Cry of the Cat is great. I don't know what else to say about that one. Horrors of the Black Ring. This is a solid B tier one. Now, Horrors of the Black Ring is basically a ripoff of the Haunted Mask from the original series. Instead of a mask, we have a ring, an evil ring that when you wear it, it makes you do evil. It's literally could not be more of a ripoff than, or more of an obvious ripoff than that. But it's still a pretty good book. This like little subgenre of evil object stories, kind of, or cursed object stories, R.L. Stine seems to do pretty well, and this one is no exception. It does feel a little bit rushed at times. This one has some kind of weird time jumps to it, and the end is sort of predictable. It follows along the same lines again as the Haunted Mask, kind of. The conclusion's a bit forced, but I don't know. It's still a good. I think it's like lower end B tier. Moving on to Brain Juice. This one is S or A tier. I think A tier. Above the Haunted Car too, probably. So this one was a surprise when I reread these books last year, because Brain Juice is one I did not remember at all as a kid, even though I'm sure I read it. I know for a fact I read all of these when I was a kid. When I reread them last year, I did not remember this one at all, so I had no idea what I was getting into with it. And I was very pleasantly surprised with this book. And this one is more of like a blend of like humor, horror, sci-fi, but it works very, very well. There's also some emotional stuff in here too, surprisingly, and it hits too. It hits really hard. And something I learned after reading Brain Juice is that it's actually one of R.L. Stine's favorite. I read it in an article or an interview somewhere, I can't remember, but he said that Brain Juice is one of his favorite Goosebumps books, and one that he feels is like underrated or overlooked or something along those lines. And I can see why. Brain Juice is kind of a hidden gem, honestly. If you've not read Brain Juice before, I highly recommend it. I kind of want to reread this one. So yeah, Brain Juice is a solid A tier book. Earth Geeks Must Go. If I were to put any Goosebumps Series 2000 books in the F tier, this one would probably be it. But I'm not sure if I want to. I don't quite hate this book like I do some of the other Goosebumps books in existence. So I might actually put this one in D tier. I might be nice and put this one in D tier. It's not as bad as Planet of the Lawn Gnomes from not Series 2000, from Most Wanted. It's not as bad as Please Don't Feed the Weirdo from Slappy World, even though I know some Goosebumps fans out there really like that one. It's not as bad as Be Careful What You Wish For, My Harriest Adventure from the original series. There's worse Goosebumps books out there, so I'll put it in D tier. But this is definitely my least favorite Series 2000 book. This one, kind of goes for what Brain Juice went for, but just fails miserably. This one has some sci-fi elements to it. It tries to incorporate a lot of like that signature Stein humor, but for whatever reason, it just completely falls flat. The plot is very weak, extremely predictable. It just does not have the charm to it that Brain Juice does. This one just fails in almost every way, in my opinion. But like I said, I don't absolutely despise it. It's not one of the worst Goosebumps books of all time or anything like that. It's just kind of boring, dull, and predictable, which keeps me from wanting to reread it. I'm sure I'll reread it eventually, but yeah, we'll just leave it at the bottom of D tier for right now. I'm feeling a little bit generous to keep it out of F tier. Okay, Scream School. This one I think is a D tier too. Actually, no, this one's a C tier. Yeah, Scream School is a C tier book. This one's pretty decent. This one has some interesting character dynamics as well, kind of like I Am Your Evil Twin. The parents, the father of the main character, more specifically, has a very large role in the story, which is unusual for Goosebumps. Parents usually don't play a big role in these types of books. In Series 2000, though, I'm starting to notice a pattern. The Werewolf in the Living Room does that. I Am Your Evil Twin, Scream School. Jekyll and Hyde has a very prominent adult figure in the story. He's not the father of the main character. He's the uncle, I believe. But yeah, I'm starting to realize that the parent figures are more prominent in Series 2000 than they were in the original series. Usually the parents are there to just like disappear while the kids are on their adventures or trying to run from monsters or whatever the case may be. So yeah, Scream School is pretty interesting. I enjoy this one, but it's not one of my top favorites, so we're gonna leave that one in the C tier. Headless Halloween. I think this one is B tier, maybe. Yeah, kind of towards the bottom of B tier, but it's a B tier book. So Headless Halloween is really good. This one has some really dark stuff in it. R.L. Stine has said in interviews in the past that to keep Goosebumps kind of kid-friendly, no characters ever die. Well, that's a bunch of bullcrap because kids die in Headless Halloween. Well, I shouldn't say that plural. I believe it's just one kid that dies in here, but Headless Halloween is one of the darker ones for sure, and there's some pretty scary and intense scenes in this book, which is why I enjoy it. Unfortunately, it just falls a little bit flat towards the end, and kind of like some of the other books in here I've already mentioned, the twist ending on this one, it just ruins it a little bit for me. It doesn't completely ruin the book, but it just sort of takes away from that experience because the ending just doesn't fit right. R.L. Stine just always has that golden rule where he has to put a twist ending in there. And sometimes these books, or some of these books, would do better without them. And this is one of those, I think. Or at least to have had a different twist ending than it did. But yeah, Headless Halloween is B tier. Creature Teacher. This one is going straight to S tier, up there with Cry of the Cat. This is one of my all-time favorites. This is also one of those Goosebumps books where R.L. Stine gets his formula just right. The blend between horror in this one and the comedy it's just like a perfect mixture. It works really well. And this one is also really suspenseful. There's not too many Goosebumps books I could say that about where you're actually worried about the main character. And it's actually kind of just a tight, suspenseful story, and you're not sure what's going to happen next. And yeah, there's not too many Goosebumps books I've had that experience with, but Creature Teacher is definitely one of them. And not only is this an S tier book along with Cry of the Cat, but it's one of my all-time favorites. So yeah, Creature Teacher is solid S tier. It also has a lot of great gross out horror to it, and just stuff to like make your skin crawl, and it's fantastic. I absolutely love it. Let's see, we got two left. Return to Ghost Camp is D tier, unfortunately. Yeah, D tier. I thought about putting it in C tier, but no, it's a D tier book. Now, this one isn't completely terrible. As a standalone, it works, but kind of like Return to Horrorland, it's just a really disappointing sequel. It just doesn't hold a candle to the original. And also, this one is even more misleading than Return to Horrorland. This one is not even really a sequel to begin with. A lot of the stuff in here has nothing to do. Most of this book has nothing to do at all with the original Ghost Camp book. Has different characters. I'm pretty sure the camp itself is even different, a different setting. And it is an okay book. It's not completely terrible. There's like an action sequence towards the end that's actually really cool. I really like that. But yeah, it's just kind of a mediocre book. It could have been a lot better, and the fact that it's misleading and not really a true sequel to Ghost Camp is just a bit disappointing, I think. So yeah, that one's a D tier. And last, we have The Mummy Walks. This one, I think, is a C tier too. Yeah, we'll put, well, it's either B or C tier. I'm not sure on this one either. The majority of these books, as you guys can see, are like B and C. They're all good. I enjoy all of these, but I'm not in love with them or anything. So yeah, I think we'll just leave The Mummy Walks in C tier. That one has some wild action in it too, and it's a fun book, but I don't love it or anything. So yeah, I think this is it, guys. I think this is my tier ranking. Yeah, that's it. We'll leave it like that for now. As you can see, most of the books here are like C and B with a couple of really like high standouts. These are two of my all-time favorites. These ones are all really good here in A tier. And I think that's it, guys. That's my tier ranking for Goosebumps Series 2000. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Share your thoughts. If you want to do one of these, feel free to share, and I'll check it out. Thanks for watching, guys.